Let's stay in Parliament, and last night the House pulled brakes on processes to approve the nominations of 12 deputy minister designates after the majority side lost a voice vote on a request to rush the process. The Standing Orders of Parliament says no report which comes on the floor should be debated until 48 hours have elapsed. The minority objected to an attempt by the majority MPs to waive the provision. They were unhappy that the Appointments Committee member Al-Hassan Suhuyini's objection to the approval of Deputy Education Minister designate Gifty Chum Ampofo had not been captured in the committee's report. Listen to the Minority Chief Whip, Muntaka Mubarak.
I'm surprised my colleague, the Majority Whip, is rather accusing us of pulling a surprise. In actual sense, Mr. Speaker, it is they who were pulling a surprise on us. Mr. Speaker, this is a report that the first draft was given to the minority leader. He went through by the first deputy speaker. He went through, he drew the chairman's attention of our concern. And he did not tell him that I cannot take your concern on board. He never told him that. So the understanding of the minority leader was that those concerns were taken care of. And the final report had not been shown to the minority leader, only to get to the floor of the House. And then the concerns that were raised were not taken care of. And now the first deputy speaker is now giving explanation why he did not take those concerns on. Who is pulling a surprise on the other? It is you, because already the report, because of the consensus, that was why we were willing to stand down the 48 hours, because you are supposed to distribute this, let members read it, be conversant with the content of it before we take it. But because the assumption was that the concerns had been relayed by the minority leader and it's been taken care of, and therefore the assumption was that we do not need to drag it further, but allow it to go. Now you are insisting on your pound of flesh. The only thing we will have to do is to insist that let's go the full hog. So that the full hog is that each of the report will have to take 48 hours, and then whatever there is in there, we'll battle it when the time comes. Yes. So, Speaker, yes, they've lost the vote, and we have to adjourn the House to tomorrow, if they do not have any other business. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Now, Majority Chief Whip Frank Anodompre has been responding to this as well. He said the objection is not good for efforts to build consensus in the House.
I want to put on record that our colleagues have sprung a surprise. Our colleagues have sprung a surprise, and it is not good for consensus building. I think, Speaker, even this morning, don't go that route. We engaged our colleagues, and there were no views like this. I am surprised they are opposing this procedural motion. However, Speaker, I want to crave your kind indulgence that as important as this matter is, or as important as this motion is, Speaker, you suspend sitting for 20 minutes for the House to come back and take a decision on this procedural motion. Speaker, I submit that if we go this tangent, it is not good for the House. It is definitely not good for the House. And Speaker, I want to employ your wisdom that we suspend sitting for 20 minutes and come back to take a decision on this procedural motion. Speaker, so submit.
Joseph Opoku-Gakpo joins us on phone. So on that specific request that Frank Anodompre made, was it granted?
And so the Speaker said that he wanted the House to take a decision on that and not himself. So then he called for a vote in the House on that separately, apart from the earlier vote on the waiver of the 48-hour window. And that voting started. It was disrupted to a certain extent because then MPs were asked to stand and be counted. At a point in time, the officials from the clerk's office were finding it difficult counting who was standing and who was actually voting in favor of that. Eventually, the majority side backed down and said that if the Speaker wants to go ahead and adjourn sitting instead of suspending and coming back to deal with it, they don't have a problem with that. So the Speaker went ahead to adjourn sitting, and we're waiting to see if they will get back to that particular business today, or they'll wait for the 48 hours to then pass, which will then be next week, Tuesday, because then it's about 15 days when it comes to Parliament sitting. Before then they can look at that particular report again.
Okay, so that gives me clarity on my what's next question, which was coming next. But let's go to the specific issue of Gifty Chum Ampofo. What is the member Al-Hassan Sohini's question about the nominee?
You recall that sometime last year there was a documentary that was put out by Corruption Watch after the NPP primary that sought to catalog alleged incidents of bribery that had taken place ahead of the NPP primary.
Yeah.
And in one of those reports, Madam Gifty Chum Ampofo was captured allegedly confirming that he had given out 1,500 cities and flat screen television to some of the delegates who were actually supposed to vote in that election. So Mr. Sohini put out that particular report during the vetting and asked their questions about it. He defended what happened and insisted that it wasn't a case of bribery or anything like that. And Mr. Sohini's position is that he thinks that the responses were not satisfactory. So at the level of the appointment committee, he's not backing her approval, and he would again vote against her on the floor of the House. And that's why the minority had concerns that if he had indicated that he wasn't supporting the approval at the level of the appointment committee, the committee report had no business claiming that there was consensus that all the 12 candidates should actually be approved right on the floor by consensus, which was what actually started the whole debate on the floor itself in the field.
Right, so if I'm understanding what you're saying well, Sohini had a challenge with Gifty Chum Ampofo. The majority was under the impression that all 12 nominees would be approved. Then Sohini raised the objection. And
so what actually started it all was the committee's report written by the chairman of the appointment committee, Joseph on the Clerk of Parliament, Parliament Appointment Committee, said that the appointment committee had recommended all the 12, including Madam Chum Ampofo, by consensus. And Mr. Sohini's point was that he was not part of that consensus because he's a member of the appointment committee.
Okay.
He was not part of the consensus. So the report could have said, probably by majority decision, although the chairman of the committee defended that decision and said that at the time they finished the vetting and were voting, he wasn't present to then vote against the approval. And so the minority side then decided to then back him, that a surprise had been pulled on them by the chairman of the committee. And so they would not then allow the majority to then have their way with the additional request for a waiver of the 48 hours window, which was how come they insisted that they should go the full haul and they would deal with the other aspects as to whether they are supporting her approval or it's just Mr. Sohini who is actually speaking against her approval when they get to that particular bit.
Now, Gakpo, I'm curious, was there a specific response to what Frank Anadom said was a surprise to the majority? Because from what I'm hearing you say, the minority seems to support the idea that this approval was not done by consensus when the majority was clearly under the impression that we had a vote and we all decided.
Exactly. Even the minority leader, Harun Idrisu, was visibly upset with what he said was an unfair treatment that was coming from their colleagues on the other side. He made the point that Mr. Sohini was actually stepping out to go get lunch around the time that the vetting was ongoing after he had asked his question. And so Mr. Sohini approached him, the minority leader, Harun Idrisu, and the chairman of the committee, Joseph, and told them in their ears that he is against Madam Gifty Chum's approval. So he doesn't understand how come the chairman of the committee is insisting that the approval was actually by consensus. So they also feel that a surprise was put on them by their colleagues on the majority side. Now, the majority side was showing bad faith in terms of how they are approaching the third recommendation for approval when it comes to the Deputy Education Police. And so the entire minority bloc is sympathizing with Mr. Suhini that to a certain extent, his views need to reflect in the committee's report that he voted against the third recommendation for approval of Madam Ampo.
Joseph Opoku-Gakpo, thank you very much for joining us in Parliament.